Hello and welcome. This is an opportunity to look at how globalization has worked for some Indian companies and conglomerates, and particularly using the steel industry as a case in point at this particular time when economies like India have slowed down somewhat and economies like Europe and UK in specific have picked up. We are speaking today with B. Muthuraman, Vice Chairman of Tata Steel, who joins us in the Tata Steel office in Mumbai. Mr. Muthuraman, thank you very much for speaking with us. So let's look at things through the lens of the steel industry in general and Tata Steel in specific. First of all, how have things been in 2013?
2013 is proving to be a difficult year for the global steel industry. If you see the demand, for example, the global steel demand is yet to fully recover from what happened in the financial crisis of 2008-2009. You take Europe, for example, the current demand is approximately 70%. They're 30% down from the peak levels of 2007-2008. The United States is stagnant or maybe slightly positive. Even China has slowed down in steel consumption in the last 1 year. India has definitely slowed down. So, and what has also happened is, because of the fact that there is overcapacity in China and overcapacity in many parts of the world, steel prices don't have the same amount of pull that they had in the pre-crisis times. With the result, the steel prices have dropped. It is also true that the raw material prices have dropped. Both iron ore and coal have come off from their peak levels, but the steel prices have dropped more than the raw material prices, with the result that the spread between raw materials and steel has narrowed down. It's one of the lowest spreads now compared to let's say over the last 20 years or last 15-20 years. So the steel companies' margins are under tremendous amount of pressure, and this overcapacity in China is not helping the process. So that's the situation as of today.
So why is that gap so low, as you said, in the last 20 years?
It's only because of the gap is between the raw material prices, that is the iron ore and coal prices, and the steel prices. That is the margin in which the steel companies need to work.
Yeah. No. So my question is, why haven't iron ore prices eased off proportionately as they perhaps have had in past years?
The reason is, if you see the iron ore prices, even the coal prices, for a large part of the 20th century, I would say between 1900 and 2000, the price of iron ore was more or less constant. It was between $20 and $22 a ton. The price of coking coal was around $35 to $40 per ton for some 60, 70, 80 years. And no new investments went into coal mines or iron ore mines. But then came the year 2000, the beginning of this century, when Chinese steel demand started going up furiously, and often at the rate of 15%, 18% per annum for 5-6 successive years, and even after that at 10-12% per annum. There was insufficient mining capacity in both iron ore and coal. That led to increase in prices. So there was a time when iron ore, in a very short period of time, shot up from $22 to $30 to $40, $50, and it reached $180, which is something like 10 times the average price of the last century. Similarly, the coking coal prices, due to the same reason, went up from about $35, $40 to about $350, 10 times. Now, after that happened, in fact, the mining industry of the world, I think, did not forecast or did not expect the Chinese steel demand to go up so furiously. Right. With the result, these shortages, and because of which the prices went up. After that, post that, the investments have started flowing into iron ore mining and coal mining. So prices have started softening, but they are yet not softened, because the iron ore mining activities and coal mining activities, the investments take a bit of longer time than, for example, in the steel industry to materialize and actually produce the results. So while the iron ore and coal prices have dropped off from their peaks to something like $110 a ton, $120 a ton, coal at about $140 a ton, $150 a ton, they are still, well, they have fallen off the peak.
Right, yeah.
They are still not at the levels that are there for many, many decades. I expect the prices of both these to come down further, with more investment going into the mining activities. but I don't see it coming down to historically low levels of the last century, simply because the new mines are more difficult, they are in more difficult geographies, the cost of extraction have gone up. So probably iron ore prices will settle down maybe at $90, $100 a ton and not at $22. And coal prices will probably settle down at $120 a ton and not at $35, $40 a ton that we saw last century.
Amongst these 3 points in the equation, that's iron ore, coking coal and steel, are you able to predict the first two more easily than perhaps the price of steel itself?
Price of steel fluctuates actually more than the price of coal. While they went up, they also came down, and it's a little easier to predict the raw material prices than the steel prices, because steel prices have to do with capacity in steel. Because once you see mining operations, once you create capacity, there is something which you didn't have to produce if there is no demand. Whereas in steel, the fixed costs are very high. People will still keep producing and do business on a marginal costing basis. So that's what pushes the steel prices down.
Right. So let me ask the Tata Steel question. So as a conglomerate now, if you were to look back with a presence in Europe, UK, and we're really to some extent talking in the UK context, and in India, how does this whole equation look like today between, let's say, producing in India, mining in India, producing, importing and producing in UK and Europe?
You see, in India we have a very good world-class operation in Jamshedpur, and today the Jamshedpur capacity is about 10 million tons. Which has been built up. In the year 2000 we were about 3 million tons. So in about 10-12 years we have become 10 million ton, which is one of the single largest sites anywhere in the world. So that's a world-class operation that generates an EBITDA between 30 and 35%. We are building a new greenfield steel plant in Orissa, which should be ready by the end of next year, end of 2014, which will be as competitive as the Jamshedpur steel plant. And while we have iron ore reserves and also partly coal reserves, which is also helping the India operations, but by itself the Indian operations, in terms of the quality of products it makes, the efficiency with which it makes, the cost of conversion, all that is all world class. Now in the European situation and the Indian demand, while the demand has fallen off compared to what it used to be in the last 3, 4, 5 years and the last decade, this year it is not growing as fast. Still we are in a very good position in the Indian market. In the European market, as I told you, there is a drop of something like 30% compared to the previous levels, which is quite unprecedented. The economy is not in a good shape in all parts of Europe, and especially in the UK it is not in good shape.
But UK has come out, Europe has come out of recession, at least officially.
It has come out of recession, but I am still not seeing the pickup in steel demand. Maybe it will take a couple of years or a few more months to come back. And some of UK's, for example, we have a very high energy cost in UK. I think in the entire Europe, UK has the highest energy cost. And the penalty for the higher energy cost in UK compared to countries like Germany and France is often about 20-25 pounds a ton, which I think is quite huge. And similarly, their own climate change approach to the climate change program is such that it is making high energy intensive industries like steel uncompetitive. So one is, we have to find a way to make UK manufacturing. UK itself needs to focus on manufacturing. It needs to give incentive for steel manufacture, downstream manufacture, get more ancillaries going, build more infrastructure, which in any case UK requires a lot of infrastructure at this stage, and focus more on technical education. If UK does all this, I believe UK also can become a manufacturing competitive country. You take a country like Japan or South Korea, which are high cost economies, but even though they are high cost economies, Japan continues to make more than 100 million tons of steel. South Korea makes the steel that it was making before. Even Germany, to that extent, even though the economy is not so good in Europe, Germany has retained its high-end manufacturing capability very well. So it requires a certain set of factors to make a country continue to be competitive in manufacturing, and manufacturing is something which gives employment, and steel industry is a prime example of manufacturing.
Right. So, your thoughts on the British India corridor in specific? I mean, what do you feel could be done to either look at investments going from here to there, which has been the case perhaps more than often, or coming in from the UK?
You know, UK still has UK is a free market, so there are no sort of laws that prevent you from making investments and so on. So it's an open and free market. So to that extent, the rules of the game are sort of clear and transparent. So the governance systems are very good. These are the positive factors of UK. UK by itself is not a large market. That's the disadvantage. But I also believe that many UK companies have opportunities in India. India is building infrastructure. There is a great need for infrastructure. The education is in good shape in the UK. I think India needs a lot more educational institutions, improvement in fundamental education, improvement in high tech education, improvement in management education. India needs a lot of research. There is a lot of research that gets done in the UK in many institutes, and I think areas like aircraft manufacture, areas like defense, in which UK and India can work together and quite profitably for both the countries.
Right. So you talked about Tata Steel's Orissa plant, which is coming up, you said, in 2014. What else is on Tata Steel's plate, whether in India or the rest of the world?
You see, just now Tata Steel is in the process of assimilating its global thing. For example, our European operations, partly because of the economy of Europe, economic situation in Europe, and partly because of the high cost of raw materials, both coal and iron ore, our UK operations are still not as profitable as what we would like them to be. So that's a massive job, and that is a job that we are on just now. And just now, in terms of expansion, what we will do is we are looking at, of course, when we have created 10 million ton capacity in Jamshedpur, we will always try and see what best it can do, something more than 10. Once we finish the 3 million ton expansion in Orissa, we will go on to the next phase of another 3 million ton in Orissa. That is the next thing. And assimilating our foreign acquisitions, especially the European acquisitions, and making it profitable. That's on the plate now.
Right. So how do you see, I mean, this is a more general economic environment question when it comes to India. So how do you seeing the environment? Because from your point of view, things seem to be moving on track. I mean, demand may have slowed, but your capacity expansions are on track, and perhaps in keeping with, broadly at least, plans that you set out maybe a decade ago.
Yeah, but coming to India, and also with reference to steel industry of India, you see, today India consumes 75 million tons of steel, and it has a population of more than 1.3 billion people. It should actually consume something like, it has the potential to consume something like 300-400 million tons of steel. So you need to create a foundation and a platform for us to reach 300-400 million tons of steel, let's say by 2025 or 2030. But if you see the current problems, today, for example, the mining sector in India is not in good shape. No renewal of leases are taking place. No grant of new licenses for mining. There has been a delay in clearances of environment, because of which steel projects are getting delayed. So there is a need for creating a steel capacity in India, for which we need very good, clear-cut, transparent laws in terms of mining, a process of allocation. Taxes and duties are one of the highest in India for mineral products, which is now at about 50% or 52%, as against normally which is about 30-35% in the rest of the world. So many of these need to be corrected. We need to create infrastructure. Our ports have to become better. So if we do all that, the steel industry of India, today we may be in okay situation. The steel companies in India, while the demand has come down, but there is still some growth.
Yeah.
And there is not enough steel capacity in India. So India imported steel. Till last year it was importing steel. This year probably the imports may be a little bit less in terms of the rupee, depreciated rupee and so on and so forth. So, but the longer term, I think the steel industry needs to have better conditions for its growth in terms of mining policies, in terms of land acquisition, speed and land acquisition laws, and clear-cut and transparent policies of transfer of land. All that is required to ensure that the steel industry grows.
Right. And just a last kind of broad question. I mean, do you feel that the tariffs are well balanced today in terms of allowing the free flow of imports or exports, as the case may be, again, in the context of steel?
I have no particular issues on the tariffs. For example, I have always maintained the steel import duties have come down over the years. If you see in 1991 or pre-1991, the steel imports were having a levy of tariff of more than 100% in many cases. Today it has come down to 5%, and which I think is a good thing. And in spite of the fact it has come from say 100% to 5%, the steel companies in India have sort of managed it and make sure that they become competitive and they improve their internal systems and processes. All that has happened in the Indian steel industry. So the Indian steel industry is actually one of the most efficient steel industries of the world. It's of course some more work has to be done on energy efficiency and so on and so forth, but Indian steel industry is an efficient steel industry. What we need is external things to make sure that we all are competitive at our gates, but once you have to take the material to the customer, roads and the distances and the cost of freight, all that is very high. But I have no problem in the interstate barriers and so on and so forth. But as far as tariffs and import duties are concerned, I have no issue on that.
So, absolutely last question. So how do you look at 2014 then? You said 13 has been a little difficult for most of industry, but you think 14 could bring some
2014 to my mind should be better. At least as far as Tata Steel is concerned, we would have had the beginnings of another, the full impact of the 10 million ton. We would have had a better, we would have started the 3 million ton project in Orissa, and it would have just started getting some production and some sales there. And in Tata Steel Europe, we are actually implemented quite a number of internal improvement programs and cost saving programs and product mix improvement programs. All that with Europe slightly beginning to sort of grow and coming out of recession, I would expect that impact would be a positive impact on Tata Steel.
Right, Mr. Muthuraman, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.